fiction can be awesome. It can be inspirational. It can help us grow with Jesus. But what does it do to our theology of marriage? And can it be something which actually reinforces some of the bad stuff that we've been hearing from other books? That's what we're going to be talking about today in our look at And the Shofar Blew by Francine Rivers. Hi, I'm Sheila Ray Gregor from baremarriage.com, where we like to talk about healthy, evidence-based biblical advice for your sex life and your marriage. And while we normally look at self-help books, what I decided to do last week was to start a discussion on Christian fiction, looking specifically at a book that I read about 20 years ago that just rubbed me totally the wrong way, even though I liked other books by this author, because I felt that the overall message that it was giving about marriage and even about faith could actually end up hurting people when they read it, because that wasn't the message that we should be taking away. So I grabbed a bunch of women, a bunch of my friends to talk about this, and I would like to invite you to that conversation. Well, everybody, we are here to do something we have never done before, which is look at a fiction book. And I have three good friends with me to do this. I have Joanna Sawatsky, my co-author for Great Sex Rescue, She Deserves Better, our stats person for everything we do. She's just awesome. And she writes all our peer-reviewed papers. We have several in submission right now. Yay. And if you want to support that, of course, you can give to the Good Fruit Faith Initiative of the Bosco Foundation. And the link is in the podcast notes. We have Dr. Mary Lynn, who is the author of Rebecoming, an awesome book if you just want to understand all like the psychology terms people talk about, like trauma and attachment and all of that, and then gives you super practical exercises to bring them home. Love that book. We talked about it in the podcast. She is a clinical psychologist, does a ton of great work. And then my good friend, Sarah McDugal. Hello, Sarah. Sarah is crocheting. Sarah's getting into this. So we're going to talk fiction. She's going to crochet. Sarah.
You know what? This is so that I have something to keep my hands busy so that I can control how much I talk, because I have a lot of thoughts and this will help me listen to everyone else.
Yes.
Seriously.
And Sarah does a great work with betrayal trauma, with people who are leaving abusive marriages in her work, Wilderness to Wild. And we will put links to those groups too. Okay, everybody. So we read And the Shofar Blew.
Yes.
Yes. You know what I'd like to do first is, can we just summarize the plot? Because I want people to be able to follow our conversation, even if they haven't read the book. Because this conversation isn't really about like, you have to understand everything in the book as much as it is, we want to talk about the impact of Christian fiction. So I'm going to try, anyone can jump in if they want, but it focuses around a couple named Eunice and Paul, who are a very young couple. They get started at a very small church, which Paul then grows to become a mega church, and sort of over time kind of just gets darker and darker and loses his faith and isn't really following Jesus. And his wife is long suffering and puts up with this. And they have a son named Tim, which becomes important later. Paul is the son of another megachurch pastor, and so his father David and his mother Lois feature in the story. And basically, David had multiple affairs, and Lois covered it up. And then Eunice and Paul recreate the Lois and David dynamic in their marriage. And then we have like this bastion of great faith, this older couple, Abby and Samuel, who call Paul to the church, and Samuel is kind of his mentor, but also antagonist, because Samuel wants Paul to stay with Jesus. We have a man named Stephen, who was an alcoholic, but had a moment with Jesus. And throughout the book, he's growing closer and closer to Jesus. And then we have a woman named Sheila, who is the worst person in the world and who seduces the pastor, and who's just an evil Jezebel floozy. Is that about right?
That's a pretty good summary.
That is how she is described.
Yes.
And not so many words, and how they describe how she dresses and her manipulation. Yes.
For sure. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't, does anyone have any broad thoughts they want to share before we jump in, or should we just jump in?
I would say there were a lot of, so I used to read Francine Rivers books back in the 80s and 90s. I was a huge fan. And I still love her writing for many reasons, but this book was difficult to read because it brought up a lot of triggers around how church ought not to be and how Christianity ought not to be. And I came from that world. So
Mm-hmm.
while I was reading it from a sort of a let's be critical so we can talk about it, it was actually like stirring up some feelings in me. I was getting pretty like, I was ready to wring some necks in the character. So anyway,
Yes.
that was my personal response to it.
Has everyone else read other Francine Rivers? I mean, I was a huge
Oh
fan of
yeah,
Mark of the Lion.
I read a ton.
Yeah, didn't like all of hers. I mean, we talked about Redeeming Love before and how there's some
Mm.
problems with consent in that book and the movie adaptation and different things. But yeah, you haven't read any, Joanna? You
No,
ever read?
I grew up on Lori Wick was my favorite Christian romance
Okay.
author as a
Uh-huh.
teenager. And I really enjoyed Dee Henderson, who kind of did more like action
I
slash
like her too.
romance.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
Yes.
Yes, she was great. But no, I had never read Francine Rivers. I'm not sure why not. But I
Okay.
never had read her
It's
stuff.
like your mother's fiction series. That's why.
So for me, I grew up not allowed to read fiction.
Ah,
So I made up
wow.
for it late teens, early college, read all of the Mark of the Lion stuff,
Mm-hmm.
um, a whole bunch of them. I think I read most of Francine Rivers. Um, she felt edgier than Jeanette Oak
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
because
Mm-hmm.
Jeanette Oak was like a Hallmark movie on repeat,
Yeah,
right?
Mm-hmm.
It was just
yeah,
like they were all the same plot.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so I liked that Francine Rivers dug deeper into stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But, I was just, I meant to look at this before, but this came out in 2003,
Yeah.
which was the year I got married.
Mm.
Mm,
And for me, I read it as a brand new pastor's wife
mm,
before I lived Eunice and Paul's story.
Right.
mm,
So, Mary, like you were saying, it brought up a lot of stuff for you. I lived her. I lived this book
mm-hmm.
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 in many ways. Being a pastor's wife, dealing with varying layers of infidelity and addiction and abuse and control. So I have to read it carefully
Mm-hmm.
because it's very personal, and I have so many thoughts.
Okay.
Uh, but you said Sheila, like broad strokes. Besides the personal connection to it, I think it's really important to start out as we discuss fiction, just reminding that fiction and nonfiction, anyone who's listening, someone can write a fiction book and describe really terrible things happening and have a motivation for it to either be a cautionary tale that you learn
Mm-hmm.
from how not to do all the things,
Mm-hmm.
or for it to be, this is the way things should be done. Like there was this bad side of it,
Mhm.
but then here's the good people, and this is what they did, and this is how you should handle it. Or where it is simply a snapshot of the way things are. Like
Mm-hmm.
fiction
Mm-hmm.
can be any of those three. And so keeping that in mind as we kind of take it apart and the impact of how we read Christian fiction, I think it shifts the conversation a lot from nonfiction prescriptive
Mm,
kinds of
Exactly.
material.
mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
we should
Exactly.
probably establish that expectation for
Mm-hmm.
everyone
Yeah.
listening.
Yeah, exactly. Because nonfiction is giving you advice on how you should live. And
Mm-hmm.
so you can look at specific sentences and you can analyze them and is this good? Fiction isn't
Right,
doing that.
right.
Um, and so yeah, like fiction doesn't give advice. And so what we need to do instead, I think,
But
when
it
we're looking
does.
at fiction, yeah, but it doesn't give specific advice, but it does end
Right.
up giving advice in the sense of what is this book portraying
Mm-hmm.
as ideal? Like what is
Yeah,
this book
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
calling us
yeah.
to? And what
Mm-hmm.
is this book saying this is just not a good way to live out? Right?
Mm-hmm.
Like what is the message that you want to
Mm-hmm.
take at the end of this book?
Mm-hmm.
Hey there. Have you ever been challenged when you bring up some of the stuff we share on this podcast about how, hey, there's no need to be so angry. Men and women are equal now. And you know that's not right, but you don't know what to say? Well, thank you to the sponsor of today's podcast, Zondervan Publishers, for publishing an amazing book that can give you the words and connect the dots for you. Dorothy Greco's For the Love of Women has just launched, and it's such an incredible book. Dorothy Greco's book shows how in all kinds of different areas of society, in business, in medicine, in the church, of course, in government, and especially with sex, that women are set up often to fail. We have great obstacles that we're facing, but we can overcome them. She points us to how, and she gives us a way to answer people when they say, oh, but the sexes are equal now. So pick up For the Love of Women. You will love it just as much as I did. Yeah, I do want to jump in, Joanna. I can see.
Oh, you can see, yes. So I decided before I read this book, I decided that I was going to read a book that I'd been meaning to read forever, which is The Tenant of Wildfell Hall by Anne Bronte. And so I read that.
That's Bronte's. Wait, for everyone who doesn't know, that's Bronte's sister. So think like
Yes.
long time ago.
long. They're Victorian. This came out in 1847.
Okay.
And boy, howdy, Anne was spicy. She nailed her portrayal of her description of betrayal, trauma, and addiction and abuse. Blew Francine Rivers out of the water for how much I believe that people would actually act like this. And it was 1847. Beautiful.
You need to go reread that.
It's so good. Oh, like you would love it, Sarah. And it's deeply Christian.
Not me running to Amazon right now. Carry on.
So that is the tenant of, say it again,
Wildfell Hall.
Like amazing. It's a book about men learning emotional maturity and women standing up to bad dudes and making it work.
So
incredible. But I read it and I was like, oh, this is not only describing the tragedy of this is how the world was for women in the 1840s. That if you got married, you had no options. You were completely stuck. And this woman fighting to get herself unstuck and doing it. Oh, you're just like, yes, girl, go. And I know that I have had so many theological moments where I'm like, oh, this is how I think about theology, and it's so edgy and new. And then I realize that it's all in the Chronicles of Narnia. Every single time I do this, it's just in Narnia because I was so profoundly shaped by that fiction. And similarly, I think that all of my dating and marriage advice is in Jane Austen stuff. Like, girl she was just laying down facts after fact about how do you find a good marriage? What does it mean to, what happens if you don't make a good choice, right? Like she was thinking about all of that stuff and describing it beautifully. And so fiction can be a powerful way for us to imagine what it's like to be another person, to practice that theory of the mind, and to then be able to apply it to our own lives. What bugged me about this book was that I felt like this is a fancy English word. It's called verisimilitude, which just means how psychologically real do these people feel? And a lot of the time I felt like there was a lack of psychological realness to the characters. Like one of the characters on her deathbed, she's literally dying. She dies that morning. And the last thing she talks about is that there's a groundbreaking for the new church building. That's the and she dies like an hour later. And you're like, no, that's not what's like. She'd be talking about her daughter or her husband. Not like it actually reads as really petty. And we're supposed to read it and be like, oh, how right. And I'm like, no. A, it's so unrealistic, and B, it's so petty. Like, no, there's just a consistent lack of thinking through how do people actually act. Like the Sheila character, just no one is like that.
It felt like some of them were caricatures.
Yes, and if there was someone like that, she wouldn't be popular.
Yeah. And we'll get to that one in a second. Okay. Yeah. So great. I also want to point out what you said, Joanna, about how, a lot of your theology is from Narnia, which was great, like awesome series, right? But this is the problem is that a book can be not good and have not good theology, but still give us our theology. And
Exactly.
that's what I really want to
Exactly.
talk about, is like,
Yeah.
it's not only good books that give us their theology, bad books do too.
Yep.
And that's my concern for this one. And
There's
I'm
a
not saying the book is overall
worldview that's
bad.
being presented
Mhm.
that is so infused in the storyline that sometimes it's so
Mhm.
subtle how it influences the way you think about the way life should be and the way faith should be. And certainly back in the day when I was reading it, it was so clear. This is the way you're supposed to live your life. Now, with maturity and deconstruction and understanding my faith, I look back and think, wow, I can't believe, and that's part of the uh, triggers for me is that I can't believe I actually drank the Kool-Aid on this. That was the
Mhm.
challenge for me. And then I'm so glad that clarity has come as I've matured and moved out of that box of the way things should be. And I can see it objectively. Wow. And so books like this have had a powerful influence on, I think, many, many
Mhm.
readers over the years,
Mhm.
in some good ways, but in a lot of not so good ways, because it just confirmed the bad theology that we were raised in.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just
Okay.
they doubled down on how this is supposed to look in real life.
Yeah.
It's one thing if you hear it from a preacher, it's
Yeah.
another thing if it's painted in a real life accessible story, and this is how it's
Exactly.
supposed to play out. Because I know, rereading it, I haven't read this in over 20 years, but rereading it, I realized that so much of what I had latched onto, that
Hmm.
regardless of
Yeah.
what a pastor or a ministry leader may be doing in their secret private life, my role as a wife is to cover, to
Hmm.
smile, to
Hmm.
forgive, to say
Hmm.
nothing to anyone. I lived that out for years. And I absolutely believed that reading this, rereading it this last week,
Mhm.
I can see it's this book is a huge part of where that sense of brushing obligation
Hmm.
to
Hmm.
Mhm.
secrecy in the name of righteousness.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. Okay, so let's just talk about that.
Yeah.
Hold on a second. So I have some big picture questions on themes from this book. And the biggest one I think is this one, is what is the vision of redemption that we have from this book? And if I were to sum it up, I would say that if we wait long enough, God's going to work a miracle.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I was raised. Just pray. Like the sheer number of times where there's devastating circumstances happening and they're being told, the character's being told to pray. And somehow you can, it sort of like reinforces this passivity that
Yes.
faith is just waiting on the Lord and you don't have to do anything. You don't have to do the hard work of examining your soul, changing your behavior, confronting other people, heading into difficult, dark situations. You just have to pray and
Mhm.
keep a smile on your face. Like you said, Sarah, like you have to just be that wife as if everything's okay.
Mhm.
And that was very, so not true about
Yes.
about life.
I think another theme that I see overarching through it, well, two actually. And one is that real change can happen instantaneously without any work
Yes.
being done.
Yes.
So if someone is just convincing enough, then it's good now. And you
Yeah.
should drop all your guard and go back. And that's really the ending note of the book, not to jump to the
Mhm.
end. But the second is that all throughout, there were women who were profoundly intuitive,
Mm,
connected to the Holy Spirit, wise,
hmm.
and their contributions were silenced, shut down,
Hmm.
dismissed,
Hmm.
swept away
Hmm.
because they were women.
Mhm.
And their internal dialogue, which one of the literary factors that she uses, one of the tools that she uses is a lot of italicized sections of the different internal self-talk. And the female's internal dialogue is a non-stop narrative of cognitive dissonance and self-doubt
Yep.
Yeah. And she
And
doesn't
shame.
and she
and
doesn't
shame.
point this out as wrong, actually. And we'll get to that.
That's the thing.
We'll
It's
get
not
to
that it
that in a
doesn't
minute.
happen.
Yeah.
It's that it's never said, and they should have been able to listen to their
Mhm.
instincts and
Yeah.
follow their intuition.
Yeah, I want to put a pin in that because I want to come back to how she handles prayer and what we're supposed to pray
Mhm.
about in a second. So put a pin in that. But I want to read, this is a bit of a longer passage, but I want to pick up what Sarah said about how change happens instantaneously. This comes at the very end of the book. Um, Everything has come crashing down for Paul. His wife has discovered his affair. And I think this is like within 24 hours
Hmm.
of the wife discovering the affair. Maybe it's 36. I don't know, but it's like super, super soon. Okay.
It's less than a week.
Yeah, yeah, like it's over, like I think it's less than 2 days. Like
Mm.
there's a very condensed time period here, okay? And I'm just going to read these paragraphs. So this is Eunice thinking and talking to herself. Paul Hudson wasn't her knight in shining armor. He hadn't been for a long, long time. No, beloved, he's just a man fooled by a common enemy, the same enemy who's trying to fool you now into believing that Jesus hasn't the power to restore the stolen years. She could say what he needed to hear and see where that would take him. I forgive you, Paul. In obedience to you, Lord, I forgive him. As I've forgiven him over the years, so I forgive him again now. Because of you, only because of you, and only in your power can I forgive. She let out her breath slowly, her muscles relaxing. Eunice put her hands around the warm cup and tried to capture her rebellious thoughts and focus them on Jesus. What would Jesus have her do? Oh God, I know. She didn't even have to ask that question. Tears slipped down her cheeks. She too was a sinner saved by grace, and by his grace and through it, she was to extend grace to others. For wasn't that what grace was all about? Extending love to someone who trashed what you held so dear. If Jesus had done that for the unrepentant, couldn't she bring herself to do likewise for a man with a broken and contrite heart?
I was so angry reading that. So angry because if this is God talking to her, I think it's more the enemy talking to her because there
Yeah.
was so much shame. There was so much shoulding. This is the way you ought to respond. Um, and she wasn't allowed to have her own normal grief,
Mhm.
anger, betrayal feelings. It was labeled as rebellious.
Rebellious
Rebellious.
thoughts. It's
Mhm.
that
What? It's
that part.
rebellious emotions. It's rebellious to have normal emotions of betrayal and hurt and all of that. And so
Mhm.
it's this pattern that I see all the time where a bad thing happens and a woman steps in and takes on the responsibility of somehow I did something wrong or said something wrong or however it might be. On the one side, it does give us a sense of control, like somehow we can do something about it. But the other hand, I think we're socialized as females who were raised in a Christian world that somehow we are responsible for a lot of bad behavior that goes around. And so that part really made me so angry. It's like it's ungodly to feel anger or hurt.
Yeah. And she says this, she too was a sinner saved by grace. It reminds me,
Oh
Joanna,
gosh.
Sin leveling.
remember the Elizabeth Elliot thing? So Elizabeth Elliot in Passion for
Oh,
Purity talks
yep.
about how she and Jim had
Hmm.
not been dating, but they had been trying to figure out if they were going to date or marry or whatever, and he kept saying no. But he would regret that they had like
Oh,
touched arms or
okay, so
something.
I would just like to fill this in a little bit.
Okay,
Essentially,
yes.
whenever they were together, he would be super cuddly and touchy-feely
Mhm.
and like really into it and into her and very much more demonstrable than she wanted to be because poor thing, she was just very closed off. Um, and then she would leave and he would regret it and then he would lash out at times excoriating her in letters.
Yeah, for letting him touch her and go too
Right, or
far,
for oh my
which was
mother
not.
just
Yeah,
hated you. Essentially is what he said to her at one point.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And so
Was a
then, and,
problem.
and and the going too far was like he put his head in her lap once while they were sitting on a bench. It was not like they were making
Hmm.
out. Like they never
Hmm.
Yep.
kissed. This
Also,
couple never
however, we do
kissed.
need to note for the record, just off topic, but they did definitely make out a lot before they got married. That is canon.
Yeah.
So all the stuff in Passion and Purity is a lie.
Yeah.
Just needed to say
Okay.
that for the record.
But anyway,
Okay, back to
so then he said we're not going to marry. Like I don't think I
right.
want to marry anyone. And then she hears back that he's been kissing all of these girls at Wheaton.
Yep.
And she's trying to process this because he had been saying, "Oh my gosh, I feel so guilty for what we did when they didn't do anything." And now he's doing way more with these girls. And her reaction is, "Well, haven't I sinned too? Haven't I disappointed
Yes.
him many times?" And it's like,
Mhm.
"No, you didn't. Like
Nope.
he betrayed you." And this is such a common theme. It's sin
Oh
leveling.
gosh.
Well,
Yeah.
and
You
then
know?
she goes on to write Let Me Be a Woman after the death of her second husband. Her second husband, Addison Leach, we don't know what the details of this are, but we know that he was a college professor who did things that wouldn't be considered okay anymore with students.
Yeah.
And she writes a book all about how you marry a sinner. And so this just is a theme. And this is
Mhm.
our heritage as Christian women. These are the books that we were raised on, that our mothers were raised on. This stuff is just in the
Mhm.
water, that we're supposed to sin level and to say, well, I'm not perfect, so therefore I can't ask for anything.
Yeah.
I think it's really important to distinguish between, like, I would have been fine if Francine Rivers had illustrated Eunice's self-doubt and
Mhm.
cognitive dissonance, but then somehow brought it around to recognize that when a partner is living in this kind of cognitive dissonance, this emotional, internal spiritual chaos, it is typically because they are in a situation where the words and the actions are not matching with the other
Mm-hmm.
person.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the result of abuse. This
Mhm.
is a betrayal. This is a trauma, and that she should have been encouraged to seek safety instead of, like, I don't think there's a problem with stating that it happens, because it happens. Women do talk to themselves this way. The problem is leaving that as the norm, the expected baseline, and then saying that she should, and then the sin leveling that follows it. Because one thing, I don't know if you guys noticed, but at the very end, in like the last 5 pages, I could look it up, but she's praying for Tim, their son, and his future. And she says, Lord, bring him a girl who will fight for their marriage. And I was just like, because there was a really good section where her mother in law came to terms with how she had actually enabled and empowered and covered for sin by keeping things secret. And she admits it. It was beautiful, where she says, even to her son, to Paul, your dad was not the saint that I led you to believe he was. I was wrong for covering for his sin. I was wrong for keeping it secret. I was wrong. Like that is a dream speech
Oh,
from a mother-in-law. And it was so powerful. But then at the end, Eunice is like, Lord, bring my son a wife who will fight for their marriage.
But that's the
It's
thing.
like,
That's again, it's the
we did
women's
not learn the lesson.
responsibility. It's a woman's responsibility for the emotional health of our marriage. It is up to us to notice that things need to change. It's to
Right.
do whatever it is, carry the load of it. The thing that I found interesting is that Eunice started off as a young wife with fire in her belly, an ability to
Mhm.
speak up. And at that time,
Music
uh,
performance,
yes, like
talent.
she just had so much, and she had this confidence about what she had to say, and she'd say, like, it's my
Mhm.
role to speak truth to you. Who else is going to do it? But there was just throughout their marriage so much mansplaining, so much gaslighting that by the time she got to the end of it, she's the one who's saying, "Well, I'm a sinner, and I'm the one who, oh gosh, I have to forgive. I'm having such bad emotions." And what really, really bothered me as somebody who works with people working through trauma is how often she just tried to pray away her pain. That
Yeah.
somehow
Yeah.
Jesus would take it away from her, and that then she would do the right thing, and in quotes, the right thing, and she wouldn't be so resentful, sinful, and all those kinds of things. And so there's no space for the reality of what the human emotions are like and how long it takes to heal and to process and to restore our relationship. Like that is just so completely unrealistic. And so it makes those who read it, who may have gone through the similar situation, and you can speak to this, Sarah, you feel guilty because I didn't forgive my husband that quickly or my wife that quickly. I didn't restore things that quickly. And in fact, I never went back. I left the guy. And so then this is like, no, I should have been forgiving. I should have restored. And it ultimately is my responsibility because
Yeah.
that's what Tim needs, is a wife who's responsible for their marriage too.
Yeah.
When there's this scene where she's in the graveyard weeping at her parents' graves,
Mm-hmm.
and the cemetery caretaker comes over. I think that's who it is, and he's
Oh,
speaking
gosh.
to
I think
her.
it's just
An angel.
Jesus.
We think
It
I
was
it's
think
an
an
it's supposed to be
angel.
just
We think
Jesus.
Was
it's
it?
supposed to be an angel.
I thought it was
I
supposed
think.
to be
Well,
Jesus.
I
That was a
missed
very
that.
preachy angel, let me just tell you.
Well, okay, so
He
I
said
thought it was
some
like
of
the
this.
caretaker, I guess.
Yeah,
Oh
he
yeah,
Anyway,
they
said
said
some
it
of the
was a
same things.
caretaker, but you got the sense that it was
Because he
actually an
never,
Is this
he
the-
angel.
Okay,
disappeared.
guys,
He
guys,
never
it's
was to be
not
seen.
an angel, it's Jesus, and here's why. Because he
Okay.
says some of the same things that Jesus says to Mary after the resurrection. So
Okay.
Okay.
sounds a lot like Jesus.
Okay, so she's hallucinating.
He's the gardener, get it? The gardener, like
Okay.
how
Oh,
Okay,
layers,
okay,
layers, layers. How
okay.
did we
layers.
miss
Okay,
that?
sorry, just needed to
My
clarify.
But my point was, yes, no, I missed that. So thank you, Joanna. Um, she's thinking back to what a good and gentle and honest man her father was. And she had hoped to marry a pastor like her father.
Mhm.
And he says, well, what would your father tell you to do?
Mm.
Hey, friends, you know that I'm not an abuse podcast. I'm a marriage podcast. But if you've been with us for a while and eventually did realize that your marriage was abusive and you found the courage to leave, chances are you're now being dragged into court facing the same person who harmed you. Only now they're wearing a suit, charming the therapist, the judge, and anyone else who holds power over your kid's future. And I just want to let you know that you're not alone. Navigating family court while you're healing, parenting, and trying to make ends meet, it's a brutal load. And that's why I want to tell you about Exposing the Playbook, a $7 guide from our friend Sarah McDugal over at Freedom Navigator. It's specifically for protective parents like you facing manipulative exes in divorce or custody court. Inside, you will learn 3 dangerous myths that leave Christian mamas totally unprepared, a 3-step strategy to anticipate your abuser's next move before they move it, and the exact tactics abusers use to twist the narrative, plus how to fight back with truth and calm strategy. Your church probably didn't prepare you for this battle, but this guide will. Grab Exposing the Playbook now for just $7 at myfreedomnavigator.com/playbook. I will put the link in the podcast notes so that you can show up clear, calm, and ready.
Mm.
And that's really the point where it like triples down on my daddy was a good man and my daddy would tell me to forgive him anyway. And there's zero separation between I could forgive after I'm safe and stable and strong, which the season of strength, you have to get safe first and then stable. And then in strength, you can discuss whether or not you're ready to forgive someone. But there was zero differentiation between when, where, and how to forgive, and whether or not forgiveness means reconciliation and
Yes.
trusting again. These two are conflated as one and the same. And if you're going to forgive, you're going to move back in, you're going to give up the second rental car, you're going to save the money, share the hotel room, and everything's going to be as though it never happened.
Yeah.
And
And again,
it's
this is like 36 hours. Like this is
Right.
yes,
This is
very, very quick. But it's
Yeah.
back to what I think you were
super collapsed
saying,
timeline.
Sarah, about how the whole process of reconciliation and how quickly it happens. So, I mean, okay, yes, I do recognize that forgiveness is critical for our own mental health because it does develop into resentment if we can't let that go. But that's
Sure.
really for us. It's not actually about necessarily restoring the relationship, because for restoration to
Right.
happen, there has to be repentance, which we saw. But as you mentioned, with repentance, just because I've recognized I've done wrong doesn't mean I'm going to change, because
I
it
don't think
takes
we
a
saw repentance.
lot. Oh, we know this from neuroscience, to change behavior, many, many, many times of repeated change before it becomes a permanent habit of new behavior. And so if he's been convicted in 24, 36 hours, his behavior is not going to change in that short period of time. He's going to go back to old patterns. There's just no doubt about it. And so with that, you need repentance, but you need to see change over the long haul so that you can actually rebuild trust, because I can't trust somebody if they're going to go back to old behaviors. She said
Right.
that. She sort of alluded to it. How can I ever trust that he'll not do this again? And then there's no real response to that. Well, he's repentant, so
There
therefore,
is, though.
yeah. But they
The
don't address it.
response is that she asks all the right questions. It's that the answers given are deeply flawed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She says, how can I trust him again? And it's just shut up and
Just
let God
trust
work.
and
And
trust
But
in
again,
God.
just
and
offer
again,
yourself as a living sacrifice.
yeah,
Sorry,
and I want to
Jesus is the one who died on
stress,
the cross.
yeah, I want to stress again that this is like the big resolution of the book. This
Yep.
is
Mhm.
Right.
supposed to be
It's
the
the
thing.
finale.
Yeah, this is supposed to be the thing that we take away and we're like, oh, isn't that lovely how everything is fixed now? But the way it's fixed is just so highly problematic. And it
Yeah.
is this idea that, yeah, that you can wrap something up in a bow and that change will happen instantaneously and God will do miracles and you don't have to do anything and we don't have to hold anyone accountable. We just have to say, God told me to do this. And I want to move on for a sec about Tim, because the Tim story actually really bothers me, because in this wrapping up of the bow, it's like it ignores all the pain
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
she caused to her son. And I do
Mhm.
believe she caused it, because the father was terrible, yes, but she never allowed her son to speak truth. And that was the big problem. So, the dad just, it's for everyone else who hasn't read this book, like Paul, they had this one son and Paul never played with him, never spent any time with him, ignored him, was always angry at him. If he got in trouble at school, even if it was because he was defending someone, the dad would lash out at him. He was just a terrible father. Um, and and here's something that Eunice ends up saying to Tim: your father doesn't need your condemnation, Tim. He needs your prayers. And it's like, no, it's, when your husband is hurting your child and being emotionally abusive towards your child, you have to honor how your child is feeling. And you have to tell your child, what you are feeling is right and is completely understandable and normal. And we need to get you help. Not telling her son that he has to turn off his feelings.
Yes, that constant
Yeah.
reaction to normal human emotions once you've been hurt or abused, to just turn it down, forgive, pray, and trust God to change. That's the theme throughout. That's her version of redemption, and it has
Yeah.
no accountability or human responsibility to either for the offender, but also she. And what's so interesting when I do work with kids who've been in abusive families, it's not often the one who's clearly the bad parent gets lambasted, but really the deepest hurt often comes to the one who was the good parent, because she never protected him and she didn't actually align with him or give him space to have those feelings of grief and anger and all of those things. And had she done that, Tim actually had a hope to have some healthy emotional awareness and ultimately maybe even empathy for his dad, because he felt heard and understood, and like he had space to say, no, I was actually hurt and abused, and it's right that I feel this way, and it's legitimate and all of that. And so that's the challenge, that because when you're working with human beings and human relationships, there's just so many layers, and to just dismiss people who've been hurt And just to say it's just going to be prayer, it's such a disservice to what a genuine healing journey looks like. And it takes a long time for that healing to happen.
And I want to stress here too, like it sounded to me like Francine Rivers was saying that was the right thing for Eunice to say to him, like over and
Yes.
over again.
Yes.
Eunice is portrayed as this paragon of faith, right? Like she is the one who is in tune with Jesus. She is the one who is constantly praying. So when she tells Tim, you know, you need to pray too. You need to not be angry at your father. Like that is portrayed, that the thinking that you get reading the book is, oh, this was the right thing to do, when it obviously was not.
Yep. And I think that that even comes down to, excuse me for again putting on my nerds out about literary criticism hat on, looking at the naming of the characters is often really helpful. And so you have Lois as the mother-in-law and Eunice, and then they have Timothy. That's Timothy in the New Testament.
Yes.
Both Eunice and Lois in the New Testament are just portrayed as ballers. They're just thebomb.com.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so understandably, therefore, there's definitely a lot of incentive in the book, even just, again, from how she's named her characters, for us to see Lois and Eunice as being baller Christian ladies. And the sad thing is that where they fall short, they're not called out for it. Like Eunice is incredibly judgmental throughout the book. This is portrayed as being really good. It's a good thing to question if other people are saved based on whatever reason. Like that's how we're supposed to act. It's like, woo.
I think too, with this whole Tim thing, one of the problems that I have with it all being sort of wrapped up in a bow at the end and presented like, yes, this was bad, but look how much God has redeemed everything, is like Eunice lost her relationship with her son.
She did. Yeah.
Right? Like her husband's treatment of her and her son made her lose her relationship with her son. So when he's 16, Tim ends up going and lives living with Lois. I believe he's 16. I don't know, somewhere around there. And he thrives with Lois, where he's really had a hard time living at their own house. And then at the end of the book, Tim signs up for the military and leaves. And so he's basically out of his mom's life, and he has been for a long time. And she lost her son because of how horrible her husband was. Like, I can't imagine losing my kids like that. You know, like having my kids choose to live with another family member. And that was because, and that's not even considered as a bad thing.
I want to push back on that just a little bit. I don't think she lost her relationship with her son because of Paul.
Right. Yes.
She lost her relationship with her son because she chose Paul.
Yes. Yes.
It wasn't Paul's behavior that cost her her relationship with Timmy. It was her decision to support Paul no matter who he hurt.
Yeah.
Instead of saying, hey, Paul, you're a grown man and you need to do some work because you are choosing to destroy humans. And I'm going to protect the child who is vulnerable and does not have the power to consent or not
But
consent.
do you think Francine Rivers was saying that? Like, do you think Francine Rivers was saying that she should have parented Tim differently?
No,
Or
I
that-
think that the
No.
assumption, it's a foregone conclusion that she would support her husband and that her child could be collateral damage. And that is just the way things are. Again, I think it's just, it's this assumption as a baseline that this is okay. And that it wasn't even a big enough deal to have addressed in the narrative, in the plot line at all. But in real life, so the specific area that I work in is primarily with mothers who are fighting to protect their children from abuse, particularly in the divorce and custody court system. And one of the things that I see over and over again is, yes, there is trauma when one person, one parent is volatile, abusive, unreliable, neglectful, whatever. But like you were saying, Mary, the trauma is incredibly amplified if the safe parent does not fight for them as the vulnerable children. When children see one parent, and this can go the flip side too, if you have a highly abusive mom and you have a dad who fights for the kids, it can go either direction. Of course, I happen to work with moms, but when the children see one powerful adult in their life fight fiercely for them to be protected and cared for, even if that adult is not fully successful in preventing all harm, it changes the impact of that trauma because they know they were worth fighting for. And
That
in
is,
this story,
yeah.
nobody fights for Tim.
Yeah.
He vanishes. And then he just leaves into the military and he's gone.
Well,
And he's
an open
okay. And
Christian
he's
because
portrayed
he
as
went
being
off,
okay.
because he went off on all
he's
these
fine.
missions trips, and it's all these
Yeah. So
experiences on the missions trip
it's
where
very
somehow his faith is
performative.
okay. It is.
Yeah.
It's very performative. But
Mhm.
I see, and I've even had cases recently where I've had moms who have gone through divorce and custody stuff. They have an abusive ex-partner. The children have experienced mom fighting for them, but then let's say at school or at church, the children have experienced some kind of sexual assault or bullying or harassment. And when those moms are like, oh no, kiddo, this is not okay. I am talking to your principal. I am talking to your teacher. I am talking to the youth leader. The kids are like, wow, mom is fighting for me. And they're seeing, because as I'm working with them, mom is watching the dynamics with her own relationship with her child improving and strengthening, not because it's a good thing that the child had this traumatic experience, but their sense of value and worth and importance in a healthy way, their confidence is being reinforced because mom will go to bat for them.
I
think
nobody does that.
Yeah.
And I
Sorry,
just
Tim
want to,
in the book.
yeah, and I just want to stress, like, the point is, I do think that Francine Rivers was critiquing Eunice for not parenting Tim better. Like, I do think at the end that kind of came out that she had recreated it. I mean, not perfectly, but I do think it came out. But my problem is that she wrapped everything up in a bow so tightly that even though Tim hadn't been parented well, and even though he had been betrayed by everybody, he was still perfectly fine.
Yes.
And
Yes.
that's my problem, is like, you can, the message that you get from this book is you can treat your kids horribly as you support your husband, and your kids are going to be fine.
They'll be fine.
Because you just have to pray for them, and
Yeah.
God will take care of them. And that lack of personal responsibility for action is just so
Across
difficult
the
to
board.
read throughout. And the other thing too is that it's so black and white. Either you stay and you're a good Christian, or you go and you're a bad Christian. And there's no nuancing in between of all the different aspects. So, for example, when I work with couples who are going through abusive situations or families in that, it's okay to do something called a therapeutic separation, where you're not separating for the purposes of actually necessarily getting divorced, but you're giving enough space for them to be able to work through what's my part, what's your part, what do we need to resolve, and for children to witness, even though it's scary, but for them to witness that their parents are actually working hard at trying to restore and hold each other accountable and take responsibility. That is very, very, very critical. And even if things don't work out in the end, resilience for kids isn't that life is perfect, that life goes well. It's that I can handle tough things because I've watched my parents model that they are able to deal with tough things. We can't protect our kids from the reality of life. If I have an abusive husband, I can't protect my kids from that. I can help them be resilient with that reality, but it also means that I have to be brave and I have to speak up. All the things that you mentioned, Sarah, it's so critical. And that was all missing for Tim. So that's what I mean. It's like wrapped up in a bow. What happened to him? How did he get so healthy? Oh, because God.
Yeah.
I want to say, I think that the author, and I know we're pulling this apart quite a bit and pointing out a lot of flaws. I think the author did a fantastic job of painting a snapshot of how things often do play out. If we remove the fact that it seems to have been wrapped up as though this is how it should have played out, this is actually very true to life on how many of these types of situations do play out. and that internal cognitive dissonance. It's real that the difference between David, Paul's father, being this overt, malignant, narcissistic traits kind of type of person, and then Paul growing up underneath that, craving his father's approval, never getting it, subconsciously playing out and being a very covert, charming, broken,
Narcissist.
but still highly
Mhm.
narcissistic, using
Yeah.
people as just chattel,
Mhm.
obsessed with glossing over the public image and power, but in a way that seems very vulnerable and very approachable in certain aspects, and humble at first. And then how both Lois and Eunice are women who were profoundly exploited for their super traits. You have intensely entitled, abusive men, although they are never called abusive, married
Right.
to intensely loyal, deeply spiritual, intensely conscientious women whose entire purpose is to be basically the abuse beard.
Mhm.
It's not
Mhm.
a sexual identity beard. They're the
Mhm.
beard that keeps people allowing him to get away with all of the stuff he does, because both Lois and Eunice would come around smoothing over ruffled feathers, being kind, bringing cookies, baking things, sitting with the people at
Picking
their
up the mess
bedside
behind them.
and
Yeah.
picking up the pieces.
Yeah.
So they were full-time
Mhm.
chaos managers
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
because
Overfunctioners.
they were loyal, kind, honest. And the men that they married knew they would never leave.
Mhm.
Paul
Yeah.
straight up tells Eunice, I saw you as someone who was so much like Jesus. You were very different from all the other girls. Why? She was
Mhm.
more loyal, more kind hearted, more easy to control and exploit.
Mm.
Mhm.
And we
Re-
see that pairing so
Yeah.
often in these real life situations.
Well, I was
Yeah.
going to riff off a little bit, and we're probably going off topic, but I have a term I call nice narcissism, because we can call a
Mm.
narcissist a mile away when they're clearly
Grandiose.
grandiose, all
Mhm.
about themselves, vindictive, all of those things. But in our Christian world, we have many nice narcissists. There's a stat, and maybe Joanna, you can speak to it more. The high percentage of pastors who are sociopaths,
Mhm.
narcissists. It's yes, but because part of the role of a pastor is to be this caring person, that's why I came up with the term nice narcissism, because you can barely tell that they're actually
Mhm.
doing that niceness and the kindness for their own goals and their own gains. Anyway,
Right.
I know I'm riffing off the topic,
Yes.
so I'll let you
Yeah. Okay.
bring us
So
back.
Right with
I
you.
know I totally agree. But let's leave the marriage for a minute, and I want to talk about some bigger themes as we're
Sure.
looking at fiction books, which is, as we said, fiction books just show things as they are, and so
Mhm.
we're not critiquing at what she displays as things are, but we're rather critiquing the message that you're supposed to take at the end of the book. So, like
Mm-hmm.
Sarah says, she does portray what betrayal looks like, what narcissism looks like, really, really
Mhm.
well.
Mhm.
But the question is, what are we supposed to take away from it? So, my
Mhm.
question is, does she actually critique sexism in this book, or does she uphold it?
Oh
Because
gosh.
I think that she definitely upholds it. Like
Mhm.
the book, I'm just going to run through a bunch of stuff and then I'll let you guys comment on it. So it opens with paternalism. Okay.
Mhm.
So you have a bunch of old men. This is the very beginning of the book. A bunch of old men sitting at the church that's falling apart, wondering what to do. And meanwhile, their wives are all at home, cooking, etc. And the wives are being remembered for singing in the choir and for cooking, and they're talking about the wives in these wonderful terms, right? So that it's set up like that from the very beginning.
Mhm. Mhm.
The women are actually portrayed as being more capable and invested, but they have no say, and that's
Mhm.
not critiqued. That's like, aren't these women lovely? And I made a list of all the things that women are praised for doing in the book, and I'm just going to list them. Okay, they're praised for cooking, for cleaning, for running the nursery, for playing piano, and for being a great decorator.
And being pretty.
Yes, yes,
Yes.
that's something separate. We're gonna get to that in a minute. But I mean, in
Okay.
terms of
Okay. Good.
actual things they
Okay.
do, like even little things, like the old guy gets to watch his sports, but his wife can only watch TV if he's done, even if he's dozing off. But this whole thing is portrayed as so Christ-like, right?
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
Or here's just a sentence. Abby served coffee in the fellowship hall. Samuel read Paul Hudson's resume. Someone said it was a pity there were no cookies to go with the coffee. And like that's just kind of the way the whole book goes.
Yes.
And then we get to all the comments on her looks. I cannot believe how much Francine Rivers has other people talk about how pretty Eunice is in completely inappropriate ways, but this is not critiqued. This is supposed to be flattering, and Eunice is flattered by it. So from early in the book, when Paul's boss asks him how his wife is, he replies, as gorgeous as ever, which is a bizarre thing to say. When we first see his wife, she's getting dinner ready and corralling a child. So she's very gendered stereotype to begin with. Later, we have a God bless you, Paul, and say hello to that pretty wife of yours. Right. Or later, well, I can say one thing for sure, Hollis said out of the corner of his mouth, gazing at young Eunice Hudson. She sure is a sight for sore eyes. And then it even has teenage boys telling her how hot she is. And this is all supposed to be flattering and sweet.
Mm-hmm.
And then when Stephen Decker comes in, it's the pretty blonde at the piano, the pretty blonde, the pretty blonde, the pretty blonde.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I haven't got the faintest clue what Eunice might look like.
Yeah.
There's been zero actual description except for cliche.
Pretty blonde.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Personally, this has been, that really struck home for me because I was also raised of that generation where that was a common thing. And so I really struggled to discern when I was being sexually harassed, when things were inappropriately being said about me. And I would feel it internally. My gut would kind of go, oh gosh, I feel uncomfortable with it. But I would smile and say instead and say, thank you, even though it would be highly inappropriate. And it's only now, as I've had time to reflect on it, I think about the many, 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 many times that happened to me growing up in the church. And it was just acceptable as normal behavior, positive behavior, even like it's a compliment. Why would you not want this compliment? And yet I felt so deeply uncomfortable, dirty almost. And then another part of me, like I liked it because I liked the attention and I liked the fact that, okay, I'm being affirmed for something. And so it sent such a mixed message for me that I'm still trying to untangle as a woman now, and what boundaries are appropriate for me and how I'm responding in a way that's really, I'm realizing, was a survival instinct of just, I just smile and put up with it. And I continue sometimes to do that. And so that was a personal sort of like, as I process through what that meant for me growing up in that type of church world.
Yeah. And again, just this idea that these people who are in charge of the church or in charge of a Christian university or whatever, when they talk about this woman who is a paragon of faith, who prays a ton, what they mention is how pretty she is and how well she cooks and how she makes coffee and how well she sings. And it's just that constant reminder of what a woman's place is.
Well, and not only that, Sheila, it actually goes, I think, a little bit further. So this really frustrated me in the book because I felt that it was very unrealistic. But the Stephen Decker character has the hots for Eunice from the second he sees her.
Right.
And it seems to be entirely based on the fact that he saw her and got an erection.
Yes.
And this becomes a key point in his character over a 16-year period.
Yeah.
From when he is 34 years old until he is 50. He simply continues to nurse this crush and to act hot and bothered whenever he sees her. She's a married woman, and he's portrayed, not only that, he leers at her to such a degree that many other characters are aware of how he feels about Eunice, including characters who only see them together one time. And they remember it 15 years later.
Yeah.
So this guy is being a creep. And I genuinely think this is sloppy writing, because she wants us to see Stephen as a good dude. And I think that she just didn't think through this part of the plot genuinely. But what happens then by implication is that then Stephen is portrayed as a guy who was a screw up, has had a profound meeting with Christ and is on the upward trajectory and doesn't make catastrophic errors, except that he wants to be involved too much. That's kind of the critique of his character. But this attraction is so much that Samuel, the very portrayed as being wise and paragon of Christian virtue, despite the fact that he sadly makes many, many bad calls, Samuel is completely nonplussed by Stephen's super inappropriate behavior toward Eunice, sets him up in leadership, constantly talks about what a great guy he is, and just says, make sure that Stephen and Eunice aren't together in the same room. That's sort of that's the solution that they come up with.
Yeah.
It's like, no, that is super screwed up.
Yes.
If that's what you're doing. And it's such a good thing, because when Stephen had the opportunity to have an affair with Eunice in the middle of the book or toward the end, he doesn't do it. And so, wow, what a good guy. Amazing.
That's what I was thinking, is he is the foil kind of to Paul, because they're both parallel experiencing all of this profound attraction to someone who is not theirs, not their partner. And Paul acts on his, but Stephen doesn't. So Stephen did it right.
Yes.
Instead of addressing the integrity deficits of nursing a crush and a sexual attraction for 16 years, or instead of basically saying, so the Billy Graham rule is not going to fix the mental part of this, the affair that's going on in your mind. So just don't be alone in the same room. Well, that doesn't address the thought issues and the integrity deficit that we're seeing played out here for Stephen. And so then again, it kind of reduces everything to two layers. One is, it's only adultery if you actually get in bed together and get caught. And then the second that kind of doubles down on that is toward the end of the book, when Eunice is asking herself, but Lord, didn't you allow divorce for infidelity? And then she decides to stay. The answer is that even if it is actual infidelity, full-blown physical infidelity, the righteous thing to do is pretend it didn't happen.
Sometimes when we're having a really, really fun conversation, that conversation just keeps going longer than we anticipated. And we had such a good conversation about And the Shofar Blew. I didn't want to cut it off early. And so we're actually going to split it into 2 podcasts. So if you come back next week, you can hear part 2 of our discussion about this book. There's lots more that we're going to cover, including Francine Rivers' view on prayer and how problematic it can be. And actually, there's a lot of inconsistencies in what she's saying. Her view of the gospel, which is rather anemic. And what is she actually warning us about? And it actually, given the time that this was written, it's quite creepy, because she's warning people that a lot of women are going to accuse men of clergy sexual abuse where it didn't actually happen. And given what's happened over the last 20 years, wow, that was a bad take. And we'll also talk about what we enjoyed about the book. So come on back for part 2, because we had a lot of fun talking about these fiction books. And a reminder, before you even do that, will you please subscribe if you haven't yet to our podcast? Just hit the subscribe button wherever you're listening to this, or if you're watching on YouTube, hit subscribe, and don't forget to hit the like button as well, because when you do that, it really does help the algorithm, and it helps us be promoted to other people who might like the podcast too. And so that's one thing that you can do to change the conversation about sex and marriage in the evangelical church, is by helping other people find us. So be sure to hit like and subscribe and tell other people about us. And I want to say a special thank you to our podcast sponsor this week again, the book For the Love of Women. It was really wonderful. We had such a good discussion with Dorothy Greco last week on the podcast, and I've got the link to that book in the podcast notes. It's really worth taking a look at. And we will see you again next week on the Bare Marriage Podcast for part 2 of our interview and our talk about the Shofar Blew. See you then. Bye-bye.